It landed without warning. No buildup, no leaks, no soft whispers to prepare the world. At exactly 1 a.m. GMT, a cold, precise update appeared from Buckingham Palace, and in seconds, everyone knew this wasn't routine. This wasn't paperwork. This was a blade. Calm on the surface, lethal underneath. The line of succession had been rewritten. Quietly, efficiently, ruthlessly. Only children raised full-time in the United Kingdom under direct sovereign oversight would retain succession status. Only children of active working royals would remain eligible. And just like that, Archie Harrison Mountbatten-Windsor and Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor no longer qualified. No apology, no cushioning language, no explanation offered. Their names vanished, not just from a website, but from government records, legal frameworks, media briefings, even private royal documents. Seasoned royal correspondents were stunned. Some admitted they had never seen a constitutional change delivered with such surgical finality. But the real shock wasn't the announcement itself. It was what followed, because buried beneath that update was something far more explosive. A directive signed personally by King Charles III at 7:42 that same morning, hours before the public even woke up. A clause never used in modern Windsor history. A demand for affirmative verification of lineage whenever inheritance claims were unclear or contested. For the first time, the monarchy wasn't hinting. It wasn't whispering. It wasn't tolerating ambiguity. It was demanding proof. Proof of birth, proof of process, proof of blood. And that demand didn't come from faceless advisors or cautious lawyers. It came straight from the crown and from the most uncompromising figure inside it, Princess Anne. The breaking point, insiders say, happened behind closed doors on February 12, 2025. Meghan's legal team pushed too far. They reopened discussions on inheritance rights, future asset claims, and royal allowances for the children. For weeks, Meghan had insisted her children were entitled, not emotionally, but legally. But the moment she suggested future royal property disputes must recognize all heirs regardless of geography, the air in the room changed. Anne didn't raise her voice. She didn't insult. She didn't posture. She delivered a single sentence that ended everything. If legitimacy is your argument, then legitimacy must be proven. That was it. 40 seconds. Negotiations dead. Harry said nothing. Silence swallowed the room. For years, the palace had tolerated whispers, conflicting hospital details, unusual paperwork timelines, Lilibet's California registration. These weren't scandals, they were archived, sealed, and deliberately ignored. But Meghan's legal pressure forced the crown's hand. Suddenly, everything came back into the light. Pregnancy timelines that didn't align with public appearances during the 2018 tour. Delayed birth documentation for Archie, unheard of for a royal child. Internal palace requests in 2021 asking for clarification on Lilibet's verification standards. A 2022 memo questioning how Lilibet entered the line without the same procedures required of other overseas royal children. What was once dismissed as gossip was now part of a constitutional review. Anne didn't argue emotionally, she argued strategically. Uncertainty itself, she made clear, was the threat. William had avoided this for years. He stayed out of Sussex disputes. He stayed silent. But once Anne spoke and Charles approved the changes, William stepped forward and stunned senior courtiers. "I will not inherit instability," he said. "If proof is required, proof must be given." Then came the warning Meghan never expected. If lineage, duty, and loyalty diverged from the crown's expectations, titles could be stripped entirely. Not just succession, everything. Then something shifted. Harry, who had defended Meghan fiercely for years, didn't look at her when the discrepancies were listed. He stared at the table. One advisor described it as a man finally doing math he never wanted to do. When asked if he would cooperate with verification, Harry hesitated, then quietly said, "If this brings clarity, I won't oppose it." For Meghan, that moment was catastrophic. 2 signatures. One demand. Proof. The monarchy had shut the door on inheritance claims, removed the children from succession, triggered the first lineage review in modern history, and cracked the Sussex marriage open at the center. The next document didn't shout. It didn't need to. Sent to the royal archives and external constitutional consultants, it carried a sterile title that terrified everyone who understood it. A full clarity review. Not symbolic, not political. Legal. Final. A mixed task force assembled. Constitutional lawyers, historians, forensic archivists, medical analysts, privy council representatives, no PR, no spin, just the crown operating as a sovereign institution. And there was only one family under review. Anne had been preparing for this for years, quietly compiling what insiders now call the gray file. Discrepancies that alone meant nothing, but together formed a pattern. Medical timelines, documentation gaps, refused procedures, delayed made confirmations, not accusations, risks. And Anne's conclusion was chillingly simple. Suspicion isn't evidence, but uncertainty is a risk, and the Crown does not inherit risk. Meghan's team tried to spin it publicly. Privately, they panicked. Every demand she made triggered consequences she didn't anticipate. Ask for inheritance, trigger succession law. Ask for allowances, trigger asset scrutiny. Ask for titles, trigger verification. For the first time, she had no leverage. And Harry? He changed. His questions weren't defensive anymore. They were fearful. What exactly are you looking for? He asked. The answer stunned him. Absolute certainty. That's all that mattered. By the third week, the review escalated. Archives sealed. Title adjustments frozen. Foreign Office alerted. The Prime Minister notified. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was constitutional. And then Anne said what no one else would. Dina confirmation was required. No euphemisms, no metaphors, no softening. Charles didn't object. William nodded. The lawyers exhaled. The monarchy had crossed a line and there was no going back. Meghan didn't deny it. She stalled. She accused. She demanded exceptions. But she never agreed. Her silence spoke louder than anything she said. Refuse and confirm suspicion. Comply and risk everything. By March, Archie and Lilibet's names quietly disappeared from the palace website. No announcement, just absence. The signal was unmistakable. The preliminary report landed on Charles's desk March 28. Incomplete documentation, repeated refusals, no genetic confirmation. One sentence sealed it. Without verification, eligibility could not be certified. Charles whispered, then it's settled. Meghan was given 14 days. She failed to comply. Harry begged. Meghan refused, not angrily, but fearfully. That fear told the palace everything it needed to know. At 6:00 p.m. on April 4, the world watched. 2 sentences, 2 children removed, 1 era ended. The Crown will not base its future on uncertainty. William insisted on the final line, safeguarded against instability, present or inherited. And just like that, it was over. Meghan's media leverage collapsed. Harry watched alone. Britain approved. The monarchy stood unified. This wasn't a scandal. It was a purge. And the Crown emerged stronger, protected from the very ambiguity it refused to inherit. And after the broadcast ended, after the cameras cut away and the anchors struggled to find language strong enough to frame what had just happened, the real fallout began. Because what the world saw at 6 p.m. was only the public closing of a door that had already slammed shut privately. Inside Buckingham Palace, there was no celebration, no relief, no triumph. There was only gravity, the kind that settles when history locks into place and everyone understands that nothing can be undone. Within hours, legal teams across 3 continents scrambled. In London, constitutional advisors finalized contingency briefs in case Meghan attempted an international challenge. In California, her lawyers worked through the night, realizing too late that public outrage was not a substitute for evidence. In Canada and Australia, Commonwealth legal analysts quietly updated succession advisories, treating the decision not as drama but as settled law. This was no longer a Sussex story. It was a Crown precedent. Harry didn't speak publicly. He didn't issue a statement. He didn't post anything, didn't leak, didn't fight. That silence, for those who knew him best, was the loudest sign of all. A man who once burned bridges on global television now said nothing because there was nothing left to defend. Palace sources described him as withdrawn, hollowed out, deeply shaken, not by the decision, but by the realization that this outcome had been avoidable. All it would have taken was truth, clarity, cooperation. Instead, years of deflection had detonated in a single moment. Meghan, on the other hand, tried to regain control. Calls went out to friendly producers. Carefully worded talking points were offered, but the response was ice cold. Without documentation, without proof, without even willingness to engage, no serious outlet wanted to touch it. The Clarity Review had stripped the story of speculation and replaced it with process. And process doesn't bend to emotion. For the first time since she entered the royal orbit, Meghan couldn't command the narrative. She could only react to it, and every reaction made the silence around her louder. Behind palace walls, Princess Anne became something close to legendary. Not publicly, not ceremonially, but institutionally. Senior advisors acknowledged what few would say out loud. Had she not forced the issue when she did, the monarchy would have carried a fracture straight into the next reign. Her refusal to soften, to delay, to indulge sentiment had closed a loophole that could have haunted the crown for generations. She didn't just protect the line of succession, she fortified it. William's role was equally decisive. Those close to him say this was the moment he fully stepped into his future, not as a conciliator, not as a symbol, but as a guardian of structure. His insistence that the crown could not inherit instability wasn't aimed at Meghan alone. It was a warning to anyone who believed proximity could replace accountability. When he eventually ascends, there will be no ambiguity about what he protects and what he cuts away. Charles, often dismissed as hesitant, surprised even his critics. By authorizing compulsory verification, he made the most consequential sovereign decision of his reign. He chose institution over emotion, continuity over comfort. Those who had waited decades to see whether he could act decisively finally had their answer. He did not flinch. He did not defer. He closed the matter, fully aware that history would judge him and choosing to be judged for strength rather than delay. Public reaction hardened quickly. Initial shock gave way to approval. Polling didn't just support the decision, it validated it overwhelmingly. Commentators who once accused the palace of weakness now praised its discipline. Even skeptics admitted the reforms were overdue. This wasn't cruelty, it was governance. The monarchy had reminded the world that it is not sustained by sentiment but by structure. Meanwhile, the Sussex brand quietly began to fracture. Without royal proximity, without succession relevance, without institutional leverage, the mystique evaporated. Invitations slowed, interest cooled, deals stalled, and beneath it all, the marriage strain became impossible to ignore. Harry's request to access review findings separately was not procedural. It was personal. For the first time, he needed truth independent of Meghan's version of events. That alone spoke volumes. One insider described a private moment that crystallized everything. Harry, holding the Clarity report, allegedly said to a palace official, "If this had been nothing, none of this would exist." He didn't say it angrily. He said it with resignation. The understanding had arrived too late, but it arrived fully. As weeks passed, the monarchy moved on with astonishing speed. Succession documents were updated. Advisory councils closed the file. International partners were notified. The system absorbed the shock and stabilized. That, more than anything, demonstrated the crown's resilience. A family might fracture, a narrative might collapse, but the institution endures. Meghan never submitted proof. Not then, not later. The window closed quietly, exactly as promised. And with that closure came something unprecedented: finality. No leaks, no reversals, no late-night negotiations. The crown had drawn a line and stood behind it. This wasn't about children, it was about precedent. It was about whether the monarchy would allow ambiguity to linger simply because confronting it was uncomfortable. For years, discomfort won. In 2025, discipline finally did. By the time historians write this chapter, they won't frame it as scandal. They'll frame it as correction. A moment when the monarchy confronted a vulnerability it had ignored for too long and sealed it permanently. The Sussex chapter didn't end with outrage or exile. It ended with silence, the kind that follows when an argument has been answered beyond appeal. And somewhere between California and Windsor, Harry was left with a reckoning no palace decree could resolve. Titles can be removed, succession can be revised, but trust, once broken, doesn't reset. The crown moved forward. Meghan lost the fight she built her future around, and Harry stood alone, finally facing a truth the monarchy had already accepted. The crown did not attack its own. It defended itself, and in doing so, it reminded the world why it has survived everything else. It has survived everything else. It has survived everything else. It has survived everything.